Friends, if you want to watch super hit movies Harper in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Sharper. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch today's video. I am going to tell you, I am also going to give you all the information on which I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. Sharper is a 2023 American crime thriller film directed by Benjamin Caron and written by Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka. The film stars Julianne Moore, who also served as a producer, Sebastian Stan, Justice Smith, Briana Middleton, and John Lithgow. Sharper was released in select theaters in the United States on February 10, 2023 by A24 before its streaming release on February 17, 2023 by Apple TV+. Plot. The film is presented in nonlinear vignettes, each focusing on different characters. Tom is the owner of a used bookstore in New York City. One day, a woman named Sandra comes in looking for a book, and after initially declining his advances, begins a romance with him. Weeks into their relationship, Sandra tells Tom that her brother is in debt and must pay $350,000 or be killed. Tom reveals that his father is wealthy and offers to cover the debt. After he gives the money to Sandra, she disappears, pushing Tom into a nervous breakdown. Sandra is revealed to be Sandy, a parolee with a long criminal history. One night before her relationship with Tom, Sandy is meeting with a corrupt parole officer who attempts to shake her down for money. The officer is paid off by an apparently wealthy man, Max, who is actually a con artist. Max takes Sandy on as a protege and trains her to pull cons. After taking down their first mark together, the two kiss. Max. Before his partnership with Sandy, Max visits his mother, Madeline, and her new boyfriend, billionaire Richard Hobbs, at Richard's lavish apartment. A seemingly drunk Max convinces Madeline to allow him to stay at Richard's apartment. The next day, Madeline and Richard come home to Max apparently being arrested for soliciting drugs from an undercover police officer. Madeline quickly realizes that Max is pulling a con to have Richard pay off the officer, Max's partner Tipsy. Madeline forces Max to leave the apartment. It is later revealed that Madeline and Max are not mother and son, but lovers who are targeting Richard. Richard meets with Max and offers him $60,000 a month to leave town. Max demands a year's salary in cash in advance in order to leave Madeline alone to be with Richard. While meeting with him, Max also meets Richard's son, Tom, who has not yet met Sandy. Max, Madeline, and Tipsy celebrate a successful job, but that evening, Madeline tells Max that Richard wants to marry her, and she will be staying with him. Max escapes from the police. Madeline has called and leaves with the money. Richard dies, leaving the vast majority of his estate to Madeline. Due to Richard's misgivings about Tom after the incident with Sandy, Tom has been left only the bookstore and a trust. He has also been named chairman of Richard's foundation, while Madeline is a trustee. Tom hires an old family friend, Braddock, to locate Sandra. Despite Madeline's attempts to convince Tom to call off the investigation, Sandy is found, heavily addicted to heroin. Tom wants her to stay at the apartment while she goes through detox, but Madeline is reticent. She speaks to Sandy, who reveals that she knows the connection between Madeline and Max. In return for her silence, Sandy demands that Madeline track down Max so she can confront him about abandoning her. Max agrees to meet with Sandy and Madeline. During the meeting, Tom and Braddock arrive to confirm Tom's suspicions that the three had been working together. Tom pulls a gun on Sandy, then on Madeline. Sandy forces the gun out of Tom's hands, and it is picked up by Madeline, who apparently shoots and kills Tom after he forces her to point the gun at him and pull the trigger. Desperate to avoid prison, Madeline immediately transfers all the money to Richard's foundation. Madeline, Max, and Sandy are put on a plane to Oklahoma City. Madeline reminds Max that she will retain control of the money since Tom is dead and she is the trustee of Richard's foundation. After a distraught Sandy retreats to the plane's toilet, Madeline realizes that the blood on her sleeve is not real, meaning Tom is alive. When Madeline checks the plane's toilet, Sandy is gone. The true nature of the scheme is revealed. Having fallen in love with Tom, Sandy confesses her true identity to him, and the two devise a plan to con Madeline and Max, enlisting Tipsy and his partner Goldie, who posed as Braddock, to assist them. The meeting between Sandy and Max was planned, as was Tom's apparent shooting at Madeline's hands. Since Tom is still alive, he maintains control over the foundation and the money. Tom, Sandy, Tipsy, and Goldie meet at the bookstore to celebrate their success. Tom and Sandy rekindle their relationship. Cast Julianne Moore as Madeline Sebastian, Stan as Max Justice, Smith as Tom Briana, Middleton as Sandra, Darren Goldstein as Pat Braddock, John Lithgow as Richard Hobbs, Philip Johnson Richardson as Tipsy, Detective Collins, Carrie Flanagan as LaRusso, David Piddu as David Lawyer, Quincy Dunn Baker as William Tyler, Hannah Dunn as Brenda Julian Yao, Gioiello as Jack Production. In March 2021, it was announced that A24 would produce the film for Apple TV+, directed by Benjamin Caron and starring Julianne Moore, based on a script written by Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka that was part of the 2020 The Black List of screenplays that will not be released in theaters during this calendar year. In July 2021, Sebastian Stan was added to the cast, with Justice Smith and Briana Middleton joining in August. In September, John Lithgow was cast, with filming beginning on September 13 in New York City. Release Sharper was released in select theaters in the United States on February 10, 2023 by A24 and was released on Apple TV Plus on February 17, 2023. Reception. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 69% of 142 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.5/10. The website's consensus reads, "Although it never comes close to the classic capers it seeks to emulate, Sharper is just sleek and clever enough to pass the time." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 65 out of 100 based on 35 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Benjamin Caron's Sharper, now in limited theatrical release and streaming on Apple TV Plus next week, allows one to imagine what Julianne Moore and John Lithgow could have done with an 80s David Mamet screenplay like House of Games or The Spanish Prisoner. It's one of those narrative jigsaw puzzles that feels like it went from theatrical feature to streaming series sometime in the mid-10s. And so there's a bit of a jolt of enjoyment at just watching it unfold, moving back and forth through various cons until the final one lands on the table. The problem is that the Mamet brand of tough-talking puzzle movie is harder to pull off than it looks, and writers Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka just don't have the gift of dialogue needed to elevate this thriller beyond its foundation. Mamet's best films use dialogue as a weapon, as his characters alternately withheld and revealed like Ricky Jay doing a magic trick. Sharper clearly wants to mimic that aesthetic, but the whole thing is only good enough as a diversion. Justice Smith plays Tom, a soft-spoken young man who works at an old bookstore, selling first editions of famous novels. One night, a beautiful young woman named Sandra, relative newcomer Briana Middleton, more than holding her own opposite some legends, enters Tom's shop, and the two have instant chemistry. They flirt and eventually go to dinner, jumping into a quick relationship. After only a couple of weeks, Sandra is meeting Tom's friends, and the L word is even thrown around. Then she reveals she has a brother who is in trouble. He needs some cash. An insane amount of cash. After the danger for Sandra's brother intensifies, Tom agrees to get the funds from his extremely wealthy father, Richard. John Lithgow. Of course, Sandra disappears with the money. Don't worry. That's not a major spoiler. Only the first of several con games and revelations revealed through Gatewood and Tanaka's vignette structure, one that focuses on one character at a time, revealing the role they play in a script that sometimes stretches credulity as it flashes back and sometimes even sideways. The second vignette jumps back to reveal how Sandy became Sandra under the tutelage of a slimy con artist named Max, Sebastian Stan, who just happens to have a connection to Madeline, Julianne Moore, the new wife of, you guessed it, Richard. Sharper opens with a definition of its title, one who lives by their wits. That should give you an idea of how smart this script thinks it is. Once featured on the Black List, it's one of those chronological jumbles that streamers adore because it drops a revelation every couple of minutes like a metronome. But there's a simple joy in watching the thriller machine at work. We don't get movies like this very often anymore, and I enjoyed watching the succession of betrayals and double crosses, even if I could tell where it was going to end long before it did. And yet, it's easy to see where Sharper is a little dull. Not only do the cons become a bit unbelievable, especially the ease with which the final one is executed, but you realize that these characters are pretty shallowly drawn. Again, Mamet got so much mileage out of incisive dialogue. We don't need extensive backstory if the dialogue can convey that these people are smart enough and street-savvy enough to pull off their con games. Sharper doesn't quite connect those dots. It's also too stylish by half. This is a sleek affair that pretends to traffic in desperate people but rarely lets its characters sweat. It has too little dirt under its fingernails and too little blood pumping through its veins. It needs to feel more dangerous to be truly effective. Having said all of that, it goes down smoothly. Most of the talented cast is minimally challenged by the script, even if it's fun to see Moore chewing on something that allows her to be more playful. But Middleton has a lot to juggle as Sandra Sandy goes through several iterations in this twisty tale. She's very engaging in a way that makes one want to see her again in a similar project. Maybe something pointier. Ovies about confidence trickery put a spin on the old rule about playing poker. Look around the table, and if you can't see the chump, then it's you. Watch a film about swindlers, and you may well think you can see the person who's being conned. But the film's entire narrative procedure, and its pleasure, rely on you, the audience, repeatedly submitting to being played, even while in theory you are the one with the wised-up crook's eye view of what is going on. Screenwriters Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka have had big successes in the world of comedy and satire. Now they have crafted this delectably enjoyable caper about fraudsters and Manhattan's super-rich. It's a little like something by David Mamet, though without reaching the Memetian hard concrete floor of cynicism. Or maybe Stephen Frears' sleazy drama, The Grifters, based on the novel by Jim Thompson. It's got double crosses and triple crosses, and characters individually profiled in a daisy chain of interrelated chapter-headed scenes. And if these feel like the usual suspects, well, Gatewood and Tanaka finally treat us to an old-fashioned Kaiser Soze walk-away reveal scene. British TV director Benjamin Caron makes a sure-footed feature debut here, and his experience on programs by illusionist Darren Brown may have qualified him for this. The movie begins in the most sublimely innocent way, in a sleepy antiquarian New York bookstore. Gentle bibliophile Tom Justice Smith sits behind the counter reading Edgar Allan Poe and looks up alertly when a rare customer comes in. This is the stylish 20-something Sandra, Briana Middleton, who is after something by Zora Neale Hurston. They get to talking about the PhD she is working on in Black feminist studies. He shyly asks her to dinner. One thing leads to another in the happiest of ways. But it seems both of them have unhappy families. The opening to Anna Karenina is repeatedly cited, and Sandra wants to know why they always go to her modest apartment and never to his. A terrible crisis brings the two lovers into traumatic contact with sinuous, predatory city slicker Max, Sebastian Stan, wealthy New York socialite Madeline, Julianne Moore, and her mega-rich husband Richard, John Lithgow. Like the luxury goods that in one scene we see being stolen, the performances are out of the top drawer, and it is a great pleasure to see Moore on such good form. No one cries more needily, and with more nakedly sinister intent, than her. Stan is a smooth rodent of charlatanism. Middleton is a charmer. Lithgow has the wary poise of the fabulously wealthy, and Smith is naturally a darker horse than you think. The storyline's cheeky misdirections and trompe-l'oeil give the movie a seductive kind of syncopation, and it's sumptuously shot by Charlotte Bruce Christensen, who gives it a tasty bit of Brian De Palma-style flashiness. And if in the final reel you can sort of guess what's coming, or if you wonder a little bit about the plausibilities, the plot twists fly so fast and furious in this glossy would-be thriller that the movie ends up playing itself. The double and triple crosses pile up to preposterous heights in Sharper, a drama about con artists and the people they're playing that takes the hoary adage, "Nothing is as it seems," to contrived extremes. A deep ensemble cast is game for this ambitiously overwrought material. but no amount of committed acting can overcome the movie's manipulative artifice. Things begin simply, with a title card introducing the first of the ensemble's characters, Tom. Played by the likable Justice Smith, Jurassic World, Dominion. Tom owns a small bookshop in Lower Manhattan, where Sandra, Briana Middleton, a graduate college student working on her thesis, comes looking for a copy of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. The couple hit it off and go out on a date, which soon leads to an intimate relationship. They bond over their mutual love of Fellini and their shared fluency in Italian. Then someone comes banging on Sandra's door, yelling and in despair, but she refuses to let him in. Reluctantly, she tells Tom her brother is a drug addict in debt for $350,000 to dangerous people who will kill him in 4 days if he doesn't pay them back. Tom offers to pay the debt, since he happens to have that exact amount of money in his bank account. Sandra accepts the cash out of desperation. Then she disappears from Tom's life. Next comes another title card, Sandra, that rewinds to reveal exactly how she ended wandering into Tom's shop. There was nothing accidental about their encounter. Sandra turns out to be a former drug addict who has been groomed by a confidence man, Max, Sebastian Stan, to carry out his stings. Max pays off Sandra's parole officer with a Rolex, fake of course, and takes the young woman into his massive apartment. He gets her clean, teaches her Italian, gives her a crash course in world literature, and gets her in shape along with a complete makeover. All in the span of what the movie depicts as 3 or 4 months, tops. That's the first in a long series of preposterous whoppers, nestled inside each other like a Russian doll, that the screenplay for Sharper, written by Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka, previous collaborators on the Jonah Hill comedy The Sitter, requires you to roll with. But even the most generous suspension of disbelief eventually hits a limit. Benjamin Caron, the British director best known for his extensive work in television, he shared a 2021 Emmy as one of the producers of the Netflix hit series The Crown, shoots the film in a glorious, shimmering widescreen format that's too glossy and ostentatious for this schematic thriller. Everything is played with an earnest elegance not really warranted by such overcooked material, which probably read well in script form and might have made a better novel. Julianne Moore, one of the film's producers, along with her husband Bart Freundlich, gets her own title card as Madeline, Max's mother, a simpering widow who is trying to make her troubled son get along with her absurdly wealthy second husband, John Lithgow. Once again, little of what you see turns out to be the truth. By the time Sharper stops with the flashbacks that set up who these people really are, and finally starts telling a story, the movie has jerked you around so much that not even the genial Moore, in Black Widow predatory form, is enough to keep the film spinning. Movies about con artists can be huge entertainments if you can buy into the con being played. If the filmmakers let you in on the game too early, or if they keep changing the rules every 20 minutes, you start feeling like a chump for watching. Sharper becomes such a tangle of overlapping storylines and surprise reveals that you assume the movie is building to a big, ingenious payoff worthy of its cast and gloss. The movie turns out to be a sting, all right, one that's played on the audience. It's a long con game that wants to be as intricate as chess, but plays out more like Chinese checkers. On paper, Sharper is the type of movie that is made for me. Sebastian Stan plays a grifter named Max who, with his lover and partner Madeline, played by Julianne Moore, pulls jobs conning rich people out of their money. When Max and Madeline have a falling out, he meets Sandy, played by Briana Middleton, and employs her while teaching her the tricks of the trade, using her to honey-trap the oblivious and rich Tom, played by Justice Smith. Told in a non-linear fashion, Benjamin Caron's film almost manages to impress, but falters in the final act and fails to wrap the story up in an interesting way. Written by Brian Gatewood and Alessandro Tanaka, there is a certain sleekness to the majority of the film that makes it alluring at first glance. Stan's Max is insanely charming, and he uses his skills as a confidence man like a well-honed weapon. We're never quite comfortable in his presence, but he still draws us in all the same. Middleton's Sandy is warm and empathetic, a quick study, and thrilled by the adrenaline that comes from a successful heist. Oftentimes she also acts as the voice and perspective of the audience. When she falls for Smith's Tom, it's made that much more tragic when you learn why Sandy is conning Tom in the first place, and how it plays into the larger plot. If the movie focused on this dynamic between the three characters, Sharper might have been better off. But Moore's Madeline throws a wrench in the film that complicates things unnecessarily. It's not that Moore isn't great. Her performance, along with that of her co-stars, is impressive, and she has a presence that dominates any scene she's in. But Madeline adds a new facet to an already convoluted story. Her relationship with Max is the true catalyst of the events of the film. But by introducing her later in the movie, there's little time for her to develop beyond what she is at the surface. She becomes a character who is the two-dimensional villain by default simply because we don't know enough about her. Her scheming is delicious, but it feels shallow compared to the earlier scenes in the film where we watch as Max trains Sandy in the skill of the grift, or we watch as Sandy and Tom form a close bond while dating. When the overall story reveals itself to be more melodrama than thriller, that's when it all falls apart. The story gives in to a saccharine conclusion that feels droll and uninteresting. Although there's a lot happening in the movie that telegraphs the ending we get, it still feels lacking. Perhaps it's because we're aware of the inherent danger and manipulation involved in pulling a con, and that makes us question how realistic the ending can be. The bad guys are shoved to the side and the good guys win. It's never that simple. But Sharper seems adamant to make us feel warm and fuzzy by the end. It's disappointing because the film has the potential to be a great crime thriller. Its non-linear narrative and moody aesthetic feel effortlessly cool, elevating the film beyond just a crime story. Max is a chameleon, switching between being on and off so quickly, it's hard to tell if he's great at his job or simply sociopathic. Paired with the more vulnerable and open Sandy, the film makes their connection feel heavier than any other in the story. There are scenes between the two of them that make us believe there is a human being beneath the glossy veneer that Max keeps up. And that's when the story is at its most interesting. Yes, Sandy has feelings for Tom, and Max has feelings for Madeline, and those feelings are complicated. But the chemistry between Stan and Middleton made me wish for more scenes between the two. And maybe that's also because their scenes are the ones involving actual grifts. Bringing us into the grift rather than dropping us in at the halfway point or at the end. Part of the fun of movies like this, like American Hustle, Catch Me If You Can, or Ocean's 11, is being in on the con, feeling like you're getting away with the crime and being in on the trick. Sharper utilizes the cons later in the film less as full scenes on their own to show off character skill and more as a vehicle that barrels us toward the desired ending faster. It feels like a cop-out, unearned due to how much plot is jam-packed into one story. The pacing suffers because of this, and by the last 40 minutes, you can see the ending coming from a mile away, and you're merely forced to ride it out to the end. The story goes from being dark and sinister to surprisingly sweet, topped with a neat bow. There's no messiness from the fallout of a con gone wrong. It just ends. It's disappointing because I can imagine a version of Sharper where we're left discomforted by the film, wondering who we should have been rooting for all along. In real-life cons, grifters are often damned as villains, but also hailed as heroes, especially those who steal from the rich. After all, as we learn, the marks that Max and Madeline go after are uber-wealthy, with money that is probably unethically earned. There's a sort of worship of the grifter who can trick people using their charm like a superpower, especially when used against someone we feel deserves to be conned. As the audience, we should have been lured into liking Max, Madeline, and Sandy. We should have been rooting for them to win, even if we knew it came at the expense of real people like Tom. But Sharper draws the line in the sand for you and weakens its narrative in the process. Ultimately, there's much to enjoy in Sharper, with a premise that offers intrigue and a strong group of performances, but it falls flat at the end. It unwilling to dig deeper into its characters or the meaning behind its story. Distributed by 24 Apple TV Plus. Release dates February 10, 2023 in United States, February 17th, 2023, in Apple TV Plus, running time 160 minutes, country United States, language English. So guys, this is their view of Sharper movie, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.